This screencast is on the doctrine of double effect. The doctrine of double effect is a kind of a useful technique that we have in ethics, and that really goes back to ancient philosophers, was developed by the scholastics, especially Thomas Aquinas in the Middle Ages, and has been used by philosophers and ethicists ever since. And basically what the doctrine of double effect does is it helps us to answer some very tricky moral questions. The question is, what happens when an action has an immoral side effect? How do we judge the action? And when you look at morality and when you look at ethics, some of the most difficult moral choices are the ones that have immoral side effects. We looked at a lot of those when we were talking about just war theory a little bit ago. For example, if a military bombs an area, but they know that there are civilians in that area, is it immoral to bomb that area? The doctrine of double effect helps us to answer these questions, and it's a doctrine that comes up often in medical ethics. So there are 4 conditions to the doctrine of double effect. The first condition is asking whether the action itself is morally wrong. So the action that you plan to do, is that action itself intrinsically evil or morally wrong? The second condition is the condition of intention, that you intend only the good effect and not the harmful side effects. Now, it has to do with intention. It does not have to do with what you foresee. You can foresee that the harmful side effects are going to happen, but if your intention is not for those harmful side effects to happen, then you pass condition 2. We're going to see that in a couple of the examples I'm going to give later on. Condition 3, the evil consequence is not the means by which the good consequence is achieved. So basically for this, you can't be doing the evil thing in order to achieve the good thing. It's got to be the other way around, where you're going for the good consequence, but the evil consequence is a side effect of that. And then finally, condition 4, proportionality. The harm that comes from the action does not exceed the good consequences of the action. So for any action, there's going to be, or any action that falls into this principle, there's going to be harm, there's going to be good. You kind of weigh the two against each other and do a kind of utilitarian calculation. Okay, I know this doesn't quite make sense yet. It helps when we start to use some examples and try to talk through how these conditions could be applied. So, case study 1 is the one that's given by your book, and it's the case study of a hysterectomy and cancer treatment. The case study goes something like this. A woman who is pregnant finds out that she has uterine cancer. It's aggressive uterine cancer that has the potential to kill her before her pregnancy even reaches term. And so the question is, should she abort her baby in order to go through the cancer treatment? So if you run that scenario through the doctrine of double effect, you run into a couple of issues. Number 1, the action itself in the first scenario is aborting the baby. And aborting the baby is morally wrong. There's a moral problem there. And so it fails straight at action at number 1. Secondly, the abortion of the baby is the means by which the cancer treatment can proceed. So it fails the means-ends condition. Now, because there's a direct abortion, then the abortion is also something that's directly intended, so it fails intention. And then finally, it's kind of a wash on proportionality because you've got the conflict between the life of the mother and the life of the unborn child. Now, the book asks you to take that scenario and then take a similar scenario, which involves a hysterectomy. A hysterectomy is the removal of the uterus. And so this scenario says, imagine that instead of an abortion, the woman decides to go through a hysterectomy, knowing that her unborn child will die in the process. If we take that through the doctrine of double effect, then the outcome is a little bit different. So if you look at the action itself, the action in the case of the hysterectomy is having an operation that removes the woman's uterus. Now, that action itself passes the doctrine of double effect because of the principle of integrity and totality that we talked about in the last video. Principle of integrity and totality says if there's a diseased part of the body, it's okay to remove the diseased part of the body. Number 2, does the woman intend for the abortion to take place by having that hysterectomy? No. The woman intends for her uterus to be removed. If there was some magical way that she could remain pregnant and still undergo the hysterectomy, then that would be great, and I think she would probably want that to happen. Unfortunately, that can't happen. Number 3, is the abortion the means by which the hysterectomy is performed? No. The hysterectomy is performed, and a consequence of that is that the unborn child loses their life. So it's a foreseen consequence, but it's not the means by which it happens. And then finally, number 4, proportionality. Once again, we've got a kind of a wash because you're looking at the proportionality of the life of the mother versus the life of the unborn child. And so what this shows here is that two actions that are fairly similar to each other in their ultimate results, because of intention, can be very, very different morally. The next case study is one that we talked a little bit about when we talked about euthanasia versus pain control. Now, we talked about euthanasia, which is the active administration of a deadly drug in order to kill somebody, to put them out of the pain that they're going through in the case of a serious disease. The church and many, many other people, including you saw the Hippocratic Oath in the last video, states that euthanasia is morally wrong, that there is an intrinsic problem with euthanasia. Because what is euthanasia doing? Well, let's step through the doctrine of double effect here. Number 1, is the action itself the evil action? Well, the action itself with euthanasia is to kill the person. And killing an innocent person, whether that person wants you to or not, is considered morally wrong. Number 2, is the death of the person intended? In the case of euthanasia, absolutely, the death of the person is the intention. You can't get around that. Yeah, you could say that part of the intention is to put that person out of their pain, but the death of that person by administering that deadly drug is the intent. Number 3, is the death of that person the means by which the euthanasia happens, or is the evil act the means by which it happens? Yes. And then number 4, you've got that issue of proportionality, the person's death versus the pain that they're going through. And once again, there's more of a utilitarian calculation there, and that's where a lot of argument can happen. But let's think about pain control. What about if you're administering morphine to this person, and in order to keep that person's pain under control, you need to administer morphine at a level that could be dangerous to that person's health? Well, let's think about it and run it through the doctrine of double effect for a second. Number 1, is the action itself an immoral action? Well, no. I mean, we have a moral responsibility to try to minimize the pain that people are going through if we have the capacity to do so. So administering that morphine would not be an immoral action because you're trying to control that person's pain. Number 2, do you intend by increasing this morphine dose to kill the person, even if that's a foreseeable side effect? In most cases, well, frankly, in this case, no. The intention is to control the person's pain. The possibility that that pain control and that morphine might lead to the person's death is a side effect. It could be a foreseen side effect, but it's still a side effect. Number 3, is the death of that person the means by which the pain control is happening? No, it's the other way around. That pain control could lead to that person's death, but it's not the means by which the death is not the means by which the pain control is happening. That's the significant difference between euthanasia and morphine, because euthanasia, it's absolutely the mean. You're killing that person to stop their pain. With the morphine, you're giving them that pain control, even if, as a side effect of that pain control, the person might die. And then finally, proportionality, how does that work out? And in that case, you're measuring the person's pain versus the likelihood of that person dying because of the level of morphine. And that's a measurement that has to be made by the person that's administering it. All right, now case study 3 is one that you guys are all familiar with. This is the one we started the year with, and this is the trolley problem. And the question I asked you in the trolley problem is switching the tracks to save the lives of those 5 people and kill one other, is that morally equivalent to pushing the fat man off the bridge? Now, hopefully you guys remember the trolley problem. If not, go back and watch the video. But basically, the doctrine of double effect says that these two actions are not morally equivalent. So, when you're pulling that switch, is the action you're doing, pulling that switch, morally wrong? The answer is no. You're pulling a switch. Now, you foresee that because of pulling that switch, the train might veer off to this other track, but the action is pulling the switch. The second principle is your intention to kill those 5 people by pulling that switch. You could say no. Now, in the strictures of the problem, right, where basically either the 5 people die or the 1 person dies, then you're kind of in a little fuzzier area. But if you think about it, your intention in pulling that switch is to divert the train. If for some reason, when you divert that train, it jumps the tracks and everybody's saved, you'll be overjoyed. And what that means is your intention was not to kill those 5 people. Your intention was to switch the train onto this other track. Okay, so let's go to number 3. Means versus ends. Is the evil act, killing those 5 people, the means by which the good, killing that 1 person, the means by which the good action is achieved? Not really, because the evil act is the consequence of pulling that lever is that you save, the 5 people by sacrificing the life of the 1. But it's not. It's a foreseeable consequence, and once again, if the train jumped the track, you'd be overjoyed. It's not actively involved here. Finally, the 4th one, proportionality. It obviously works out, and that was the intuition that a lot of you guys had when we did the problem the first day. 1 versus 5, even in that scenario. All right, so now, what about the fat man scenario? Let's run through the fat man scenario real quick. Number 1, is the act morally wrong in and of itself? Look, you're pushing an innocent fat man off the bridge in order to stop the train. Pushing an innocent person in front of a train is morally wrong. Bingo. Action number 2, do you intend for the fat man's death to happen, or is it an unforeseen side effect? Well, in this case, the fat man has to die in order for the train to stop. So you intend for the fat man to die. Fails number 2. Number 3, is the fat man's death the means by which the good action, saving the lives of the 5 people, happens? Absolutely. Of course it is. And then finally, number 4, proportionality. Once again, on proportionality here, you win. Say the destruction of the life of that 1 person does save the life of 5, so proportionality, it passes. So with the fat man scenario, it fails the first 3 of the principles of the doctrine of double effect and passes the last 1, and so it fails the doctrine of double effect. So what we're seeing here are 2 actions that on their surface seemed very similar morally, are actually, according to the principle of doctrine of double effect, very different. This is an interesting principle, and this is something I would like to discuss a little bit in class, just to get kind of your feel for how the principle of double effect works. But I'd like for you, in the assignment below, which will be your assignment for Friday, to come up with some other scenarios and try to apply the doctrine of double effect to them. All right, thanks for watching, guys.